The NHL has officially crossed the Rubicon. Welcome to the player empowerment era.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Friday edition of Locked On Oilers. I'm your host, Nick Sararis. On today's show, we are going to be walking through the shockwaves that are rippling through the NHL. We'll tie a bow on today's show talking about the trade still to come and what the Washington Capitals were able to pull off, why it made sense. In our middle segment, we will talk about the Bowen Byram trade, what it means for the Oilers, why it's a learning opportunity. But I wanted to set the table and start talking the big picture of where the NHL is going, because make no mistake about it, the last 5 years have been the NHL climbing out of the abyss. And I frame it as an abyss because COVID hit the NHL and its economics a lot harder than the other major professional sports leagues in North America. For the NFL, the NBA, even baseball, those leagues were able to get out of the financial pitfalls of the 1.5, 2-year window where COVID impacted attendance within a year or two. Yes, there was a salary cap contraction briefly in all of those leagues, but they were back to business within 2 years. For the NHL, it took 4, it took 5. And now with this upcoming season on the horizon, with a new collective bargaining agreement about to go into effect, you are watching the long-term economic factors that have compounded into each other for the last decade materialize in a new hockey world. And I don't use that expression lightly because the reality of the situation is we are in unprecedented territory for the salary cap era. When you think about where the NHL was 20 years ago, they come out of a lockout that cancels an entire season. And one of the conditions for the owners letting the players back in resumption of play was the institution of a salary cap. Up until that point, the salary cap had been a Rubicon for the Players Association. They refused to accept the salary cap because they felt it would unfairly cap the earnings potentials of players, which it undoubtedly does. Now, there are cons to the unregulated market, even if you were to have a luxury tax system similar to baseball, where you end up with situations like the Dodgers, who have Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani and Masahiro Yamamoto and Will Smith and Kyle Tucker and Edwin Diaz. And I could go on and on and on about how the unregulated market isn't the answer either. But for the most part, we have existed in an NHL where players have operated from the idea of financial scarcity, that without a lot of money in the system, there was a real impetus to accept whatever big money contract you could get as soon as you could. And that led to a lot of marquee and star players staying in smaller markets and opting for the financial security. Now, as medicine has advanced, and yes, hockey is still a dangerous, physically taxing sport with steep recovery periods that is amongst the most challenging to play for an extended period of time. You are always going to end up more likely than not having a longer career in baseball or basketball than hockey because it's less physical contact, there's less demand. But we exist now in a world where most players can come back from a torn ACL in 8 to 12 months, come back from an Achilles in 8 to 12 months. And with the medical security now in place, the infrastructure in place to get proper treatment, players have resources. Players have the opportunity now to be thinking about more than just their most material needs. For a long time, there was a real impetus. As soon as you can get that first big contract as a restricted free agent, when you sign that entry-level deal, you're setting the clock till you're 21, 22 years old after your ELC expired. Give me the 8-year max term deal. Sign me up right away. You think about the deal that Adam Fox signed with the Rangers coming off of winning that Norris Trophy. You think about the deal Jack Hughes is on at present. When players were on those RFA deals, there was a real impetus to go to max term, get as much financial security for as long as you could, and wherever it was, you took it. Without a lot of money in the system, there was a real incentive to stay where you were. That is one of the byproducts of a salary cap. That is one of the byproducts of the collective bargaining agreement depressing player wages the way it does, where it makes it tricky to get to unrestricted free agency in the first place. Players are not eligible for free agency until they're 26 or 27 years old, or they have played 8 years in the NHL. So there's a real challenge to get to that unregulated market and maximize your earnings potential. But now that we have entered a market where if the salary cap's $104 million, most teams are going to have the financial flexibility to add a marquee player. There are teams across the league who have 20, 30, as much as $40 million in cap space going into free agency and could sign any player in the league. There is a real changing of the guard and a real financial reckoning going on in the league where now everybody can afford star players. For a long time, you had star players who signed where they were, and that was it. Now, because you have financial flexibility where teams can afford to have 2, 3, 4 stars in the way that the Panthers do, the Golden Knights do, the Dallas Stars do, you have the concentration of talent where now players have the ability to look beyond just where can I get the most money. Now you are watching players in real time start to come to quality of life decisions. Do I like the city I live in? Do I like the direction of the franchise? Do I have a chance to win? What are the expectations for me here? Are they reasonable? Can I be successful with this team? You have the added element for American players, some of whom, like a Dylan Larkin, a Brady Tkachuk, won something for the first time where their NHL teams hadn't gone on long playoff runs or been successful. Brady Tkachuk's never been out of the first round. Dylan Larkin went to the first round one time 10 years ago. But for guys like that, for someone like Zach Werenski, who hasn't been to the playoffs in a long time, Jack Hughes, who's only won a single playoff series, Matt Boldy, who's only won a handful of playoff series, for a lot of those guys, they got their first real taste of what it was like to be on a winning team. They look around at the economics and say, well, these teams can afford to bring me in now. And because they're in a window of contention, they're going to be willing to give up their draft picks. They're going to be willing to give up their prospects. I have no trade protection, so I can pick where I want to go. And I have real incentive now to not just worry about money, but I can get my money. I can play in a market I want to play in, on a team that has a chance to win, with guys I am friends with who have won before or have a chance to win again. Those are all strong incentives to pull guys to certain teams. And you are watching in real time as NHL players come to the same conclusion that the NBA players did last decade. Why would I want, if I'm going to be the attention of everyone's ire, if I'm going to get lambasted no matter what happens, why wouldn't I want to play on a winning team? Why would I want to be the star on a team that loses in the first round when I could be the third or fourth best player on a team that has legitimate Stanley Cup aspirations? I can still get paid. I can move to a state with no income tax so I can take home a little bit more of my money. I can get into a more desirable climate location if I'm in a rough climate market. And I bring all this up because there will be a backlash. There will be a reverb. You know, the NBA is dealing with it now. It's about 10 years after the start of that super team era where Kevin Durant jumped from Oklahoma City to Golden State. That coming in the year the salary cap jumped about $20 million. This offseason, the salary cap's jumping about 10, so about half that. But that is a significant amount of money in this system. When you consider the fact someone like an Adam Fox makes $9 million per year, Connor McDavid only makes $12.5 million in relation to what some of the stars in the NBA and the NFL make, or baseball make for that matter. You are watching players realize, I have more agency over my career. I can get to a more desirable location. I can win, and I can have a chance to not be the center of attention. These are all enticing factors, and this concentration of talent is going to have a backlash. Now, we're going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we return, we will dive into the Bowen Byram trade to Chicago, what it means for the economics of the defenseman position, what it means for the trade market, and a whole lot more right after this. If you've got a sweet tooth like I do, you know how tough it is to find that perfect treat without all the sugar. That's why Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shots bring that nostalgic flavor back in a whole new way. Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shots treat your taste buds to an explosion of fruity flavor with a tasty caffeine kick. It's a quick, easy way to satisfy that sweet craving while keeping things simple and on the go. I love the Fruity Rainbow taste because it takes me back to being a kid and eating candy hand over fist. It's a zero sugar treat that's sweet tooth approved. I like how convenient it is too. It's a small portable shot I can grab whenever I need a little pick-me-up. It's my go-to when I want something sweet without going overboard. Get candy-flavored chaos with Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy shots available online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. There are more live events than ever worth seeing right now. Games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. The hard part usually isn't deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, and surprise fees, buying tickets can feel harder than it should. That's why so many fans are turning to our friends over at Gametime. The Gametime app is built to make buying tickets simple. With upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive savings opportunities to help you get to the events you want without any of the hassle. My biggest pet peeve is when you think you found a deal. You get all the way to checkout, and suddenly the final price is completely different. Gametime takes the guesswork out with all-in pricing. My favorite part of the Gametime ticket experience is the panoramic seat view, where they show you the view of the game, the event, in your seat on the app before you buy the tickets, so there are no surprises the day of the event. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Thank you so much to everybody who is hanging out on this Friday edition of Locked On Oilers as we are sifting through the new NHL economic order. And I think as you watch these moves take shape, I think there's a lot of instructive behavior to analyze. And I think the Blackhawks are a fascinating case study in what happens when your rebuild takes too long. And the Blackhawks have more or less been in a rebuilding posture for half a decade now. You know, they still had Kane and Taves through 2023. In Kane's case, Taves took the years off, went to Winnipeg this past year, and ultimately decided not to try and come back again. But the Blackhawks are still dealing with the fallout of how badly the second half of the 2010s went under Stan Bowman, and the short-sighted moves, the Seth Jones trade, the opportunities the Blackhawks have had to climb out. And they were going to pick 4th overall in the draft. And the 4th overall pick is a premium asset with almost all assurances. The player you take 4th overall is going to be a regular NHLer. They should be able to give you 200 games as a bare minimum. If a guy you draft 4th overall does not reach the 200 game threshold, you messed up somewhere. Some part of your talent development process misaligned and you did not do your job. Now, there are guys who get drafted 1st overall who ultimately end up only being middle sixers, but your job as an NHL team is to maximize your opportunities. And Bowen Byram is somebody who fits the ideal trade candidate. This is somebody who has dealt with a lot of injuries, had a really hard time staying healthy during his tenure in Colorado. The Avalanche ultimately trade him 1-for-1 for Casey Middlestad. Casey Middlestad ultimately gets traded anyway, and the Avalanche end up going to Brock Nelson, who ends up being the long-term third-line center in the role that Middlestad had been originally acquired to fill. In Colorado, he's stuck behind Devon Toews, behind Samuel Girard, behind Cale Makar. In Buffalo, where he has spent the last 2 years, he's finally managed to stay healthy. He's played 82 games in each of the last 2 regular seasons, playing second-ish pair minutes, high teens, low 20s minutes per game, 82 games, but still, he's stuck behind Rasmus Dahlin. He's stuck behind Owen Power. Matthias Samuelsson is still there. And when you're looking around at your opportunities, for a guy like Byram, who is toolsy and has offensive upside, like we talk about all the time here on Locked On Oilers in regards to Evan Bouchard, if you're going to maximize that type of player, he needs to be on your first pair, so he's playing 23, 24 minutes per game. He needs to be on your first power play, so he's playing 23, 24 minutes per game. And that way, he is getting as much cross-pollination with your best forwards as possible, so he can influence the game. He can materially create offensive opportunities for the guys on your team and create those downstream effect offensively that you're constantly looking for. He can get from the 30-ish point defenseman he's been to a 60-point guy relatively easily if he can stay healthy and in a bigger role. The question with Byram has always been, will the defense come? And I think he's talented enough that he can get by with his skating and his puck skills without ever really being a great defender. His opportunity to be a marquee an impact player is largely going to be tied to whether or not he can round out that part of his game. There are plenty of these types where they skate well, they have good puck skills, they have a lot of agility on the back end, they can tilt the game offensively, but they never really round out the defensive instincts, and they effectively become riverboat gamblers where they have to pinch aggressively, they have to put themselves in awkward positions, and then to trade the 4th overall pick, to trade a 2nd round pick and a high 2nd round pick at that as the Blackhawks, then you still have to pay the guy, which gets to what we were talking about in that first segment, where now that players understand there are a lot of teams out there that can afford to pay me my going rate, I don't want to sign to stay in Buffalo where I'm going to be the 4th or 5th defenseman. I want to go somewhere where I can try and become the guy I think I am, where you can bet on yourself. And now, Byram didn't have no trade protection. He couldn't pick where he went. But the opportunity for Byram to become one of the highest paid defensemen in the entire NHL, play on a first pair, and then potentially have the opportunity to grow alongside the Blackhawks, who are becoming a team that is trying to add and try and win sooner rather than later. It's an opportunity. And this ties into the Oilers because I know Evan Bouchard's sticker price was jarring, especially to have him and Nurse at almost $20 million combined. That was a lot. That's a lot of money to have $20 million in 2 players. But this is going to be the new going rate. The economics of the league and of the position are changing. And with time, these longer-term deals, and Bouchard's is medium-term, he's got 3 years remaining, those deals are going to look so much better in comparison to the ones that are coming down the pike. You think about what Quinn Hughes might sign for coming up on his unrestricted free agency next summer. It would not shock me if Quinn Hughes was the first $20 million a year player. It wouldn't shock me if McDavid was the first $20 million per year player. Now, those players have the leeway to say, I want my money, or they can say, I want to help the team take a little bit less and give their group the opportunity to earn, to spend a little bit more on depth players or complementary players. These are all considerations you have to start racking your brain around, because if you're an agent or if you're a player, you have a lot of opportunities that are not there. 10 years ago, the thought of trading the 4th overall pick for a defenseman who's going to be making $13 million per year, you would have thought you were getting prime Erik Karlsson. You know, Erik Karlsson is still the highest paid defenseman in the league based on a contract he signed in 2018 or 19 with the Sharks. Now, $14 million is the going rate for a fringe first pair defenseman. We have no knowledge or understanding as to whether or not Bowen Byram is actually a first pair defenseman who is capable of playing well on a Stanley Cup caliber team. We have no evidence to that, but the Blackhawks traded the 4th overall pick and a 2nd round pick, a high one, for the privilege to pay a guy to figure out whether he's not he's a first pair guy. And look, I'll be candid. I like GMs who try. I don't think this is a good trade. I think Kyle Davidson dramatically overpaid for a player who has basically no track record of being elite. But I respect his commitment to believing in a guy he thinks is good. You know, that's one of the tenets of being a good general manager, is taking swings when the opportunities line up. And the Oilers are in a weird spot where they don't have a ton of flexibility yet, but we know once they move Darnell Nurse, they are going to have more flexibility. And where they choose to spend that money, I think, is going to illuminate a lot of what we think about the rest of the team, because what they spend money on to shore up is going to be perceived as being the team's weaknesses. We are going to take our second and final break on today's show. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the other trades, Alex Talk, Brady Tkachuk a little bit more, and Jordan Kyrou right after this. ED is way more common than most guys think, and millions of men deal with it at some point. HIMSS offers a simple, convenient way to take care of your health by connecting you with licensed healthcare providers online and giving you access to personalized treatment options from the comfort of home. No awkward appointments, no pharmacy lines, just a straightforward process designed to make getting care easier. Taking care of yourself shouldn't feel complicated, and HIMSS makes the process private and easy to navigate. It's healthcare built around your schedule and your comfort. When something's already awkward to talk about, the last thing you want is even a more complicated process. Having the ability to start online from home makes taking that first step much more manageable. To get simple, online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/lockedonnhl. That's hims.com/lockedonnhl for your free online visit. One more time, that's hims.com/lockedonnhl Prescription required. See website for details and important safety information. Sildenafil is the generic version of Viagra. Viagra is a registered trademark of Viatrust Specialty LLC. Hims is not affiliated with or endorsed by Viatrust. Thank you so much to everybody who is hanging out here on this Friday edition of Locked On Oilers as we unpack what the new economic order in the NHL means for the Oilers and the league at large. And I think you look no further than what's going on in Washington. The Capitals, a team that missed the playoffs last year, a year removed from finishing second in the President's Trophy race where they finished runners-up to the Winnipeg Jets. They ultimately lost in the second round of the playoffs that year. They missed the playoffs this past year. They dealt with a lot of injuries throughout the lineup. Guys missed a lot of time. Very well what could have been the Alex Ovechkin swan song in the NHL, though I hope not. I would like one more year of Ovechkin if I could have it. And the Capitals are in a very weird spot where they have an aging group that's at the end of their window, 30, 31, 32, and Ovechkin, of course, 40 now. And then the younger guys, Protas, Ryan Leonard, Hudson. And you could think about that group going one of two ways, where they organize around the older group or they start to sell those guys off and organize the team around the younger group. And then they have Logan Thompson in net as well, somebody who had a really good regular season this past year. I am curious to see what Washington's vision is. Are all of these moves trying to entice Ovechkin to come back for one more time? And look, Ovechkin didn't take a haircut on that last deal. He was still making a lot of money against the cap on the deal he took. And if he comes back on a discounted rate and they really load that team up around him for one more sustained run, Washington could easily be a playoff team next year. Washington could be the second, maybe the third best team in the Metro, depending on what some of the other teams do. But you go out and you trade for Jordan Kyrou, somebody who I thought made a lot of sense for the Oilers, and Connor McMichael, the 16th overall pick and a prospect. The Oilers could have done something similar to that. Now, would the Oilers have had the stomach to trade Matt Savoy, a first-round pick, and a prospect for Jordan Kyrou? Maybe. I think Jordan Kyrou is closer to the end of his prime, obviously, than Savoy. Kyrou's 28 and Savoy's 22, 23. And Kyrou has long-term contract. He's got several more years remaining, $8 million per year. He's an expensive piece to be a supplementary player. But the impetus and the logic for why I mentioned him on the Trade Targets episode the other day, he is young enough at 28 where he can be your long-term Zach Hyman replacement. Because now for the Oilers, it's not just a matter of how do we get better right now. It's how do we start adjusting and preparing for that next window. And some of that is probably going to be Matt Savoy and Ike Howard. Maybe it's Ty Emberson. Maybe it's Jake Wallman. But long term, you are going to need replacements for Ekholm, for Zach Hyman, for Ryan Nugent Hopkins as contributors, where you're going to need a complementary piece for Bouchard, who isn't 36, 37 years old. You're going to need replacements for the team because Zach Hyman's getting up there. And Zach Hyman's got a great motor, but the second that forechecking motor goes, he's going to lose a lot of his effectiveness. Ryan Nugent Hopkins has been on a gradual decline since that 100-point season a couple of years back. There is a lot of work to do with this core, and the new economics of the NHL aren't necessarily going to work in Edmonton's favor. Do the Oilers have the advantage of being in one of the tax-free states in the lower 48? No, they're not Florida. They're not Vegas. They're not the Kraken. They're not the Stars. That's number one. Number two, do you have the stigma for the American players who care deeply about the United States? And look, I'm not going to get into the gigantic patriotism of the way they celebrated winning the gold medal. It was pretty tasteless. It was pretty tacky. Inviting political figures into the locker room is weird, regardless of what the country or the political beliefs of said person are, especially in that environment where it was pretty much just him and the team. But guys like Brady Tkachuk were very clearly offended by how they were received back in Canada. I agree with the Canadian fans that wanted to boo them. That's well within your right. You buy a ticket. As long as you're not causing a ruckus, as long as you're not throwing things, you're more than welcome to boo. That's one of the great sports innovations of all time. You as a fan have the right to express yourself. And if that's something Brady Tkachuk wasn't happy with, okay, he exercised it. He went to Florida. He gets to play with his big brother now on a team in a market where he's not going to be bothered, and he's going to be the fourth or fifth best player on a team and not have to do as much of the work. He won't be the captain. and has the luxury of being a supporting cast member. The Oilers are in a unique position where, because they have McDavid, because they have Draisaitl, they could have the potential to be a team that players want to leverage their way to, where I want to play with Connor, I want to play with Leon, I want to play with Evan Bouchard. But right now, the Oilers' finances aren't in great shape. They have about $10, maybe $9 million in cap space remaining after signing Dickinson and Murphy. They need to figure out what they're going to do with Darnell Nurse. They need to figure out what they're going to do with Tristan Jarry, or who's going to be the tandem goalie with Tristan Jarry. There are a lot of moving parts the Oilers need to grapple with right now. And I do think the fact that the economics of the league might help an older, more long-term contract team like Edmonton does help them in the short term. I do think that is one of my bigger takeaways of the last week or so. The fact that the Oilers have Draisaitl for 7 more years, They have Bouchard for 3. They have McDavid for at least 1, if not 2. Those contracts are going to look significantly better over the next handful of years. If Bowen Byram's making $13 million per year and Bouchard's only 10.5, you're looking good. Zach Hyman is on one of the great budget deals in the entire NHL when you consider what Alex Tuch just got. Alex Tuch isn't that much better than Zach Hyman. If he's even better than Zach Hyman at all, yes, he's 4 years younger, which does make a big difference in terms of their long-term value. But the second half of that contract is going to be egregious. By the time Alex Tuch is 34 or 35, they're still going to be paying him $10 million per year, and he's going to be lucky to be a 30-point player at that point. And the economics of the league are going to start to get wonky. Alex Tuch's a $10 million a year player. He makes maybe a 50-point season. 50 points is about career average. 47, 48 is his career average for points in a year. A 50-point guy is now $10 million per year. You're talking $2 million for every 10 points. That's almost double what my working price points were for pretty much the last 15 years. It was always $1 million for every 10 points, $1.5 million for every 10 goals. And that squares it out to be about $6 to $7 million per year for a 60-point guy. But now, if a 50-point guy is worth $10 million, the contracts that guys like Nuge and Zach Hyman are on have excess value in the context of the greater market. McDavid only being $12.5 million when in the open market he could be 18, maybe even as much as 20. That's a real advantage. Now it is incumbent upon Stan Bowman to capitalize on this contract and efficiency the Oilers have because of the long-term contracts they've signed and when they had signed them. The longer you wait to pay guys, the closer you are going to end up to max value for every single one of them. We are entering the player empowerment era where if things don't work out, even if you've got 5 years left on your contract like Brady Tkachuk, you can demand your way out. You can give the very short list of teams you're willing to accept a trade to. And that's the end of the conversation. That'll do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much to everybody that made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 stream sports podcast network in North America. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NHL Game Night. For your second watch of the day, go check out the first ever 24/7 national Locked On YouTube channel. And if you're looking for more from your Locked On experience, check out the Everydayer Club. The link is down in the show notes where you can get access to ad-free episodes of the show on your preferred audio podcast platform. And you get access to the Everydayer Club Discord server. I will talk to you guys on Monday. Everyone have a safe and fun weekend. Until then, let's go Oilers.